Hey, welcome back everybody. This is Dave with Alum House Sound, and today we're going to be going over the intro to the X32. A lot of my videos have covered how you're kind of trying to get your stream set up, you're trying to refine your mix, but today I want to take a couple minutes, step back some, slow down, and just look at how the console is laid out. This is pretty much the 5-minute overview that I give anybody that I teach this console. And so hopefully it'll be helpful to you. So let's dive right in. Here we go. All right, let's take a couple minutes and give you an overview of this X32 console. This is the basics of how I start explaining the functionality on this console to a new user. So after we've gone through and touched the console and maybe helped them to build a mix, the next step is to learn more about the functionality. So let's take a look at that. This console is a 32-channel console. It does have 16 outputs. And the way it's split up is kind of a left side and a right side. And so the left side is all of our inputs, and the right side is mostly our outputs. They throw us for a loop on the first layer here, which are called DCAs, but we'll explain that in just a minute. Let's look at the left side here. So channels 1 through 16, you can see visible here on these faders. We also have little layer knobs here, so or buttons. If we push the second layer, now we'll see channels 17 to 32. We also have additional inputs here, which are auxiliary inputs 1 through 6. These correlate to inputs, additional inputs on the back of the console. Some of them are 1/4 inch, some are 1/4 inch or RCA. We also have the USB input, which we can use the USB slot up here at the top of the console, and we could push a WAV file or a recording back through this, so that becomes an input of that source. And then we have some effects returns here, which we'll explain more in a minute. And then the last layer down here is our mix buses, and that becomes important if you get into some later routing using matrices. We're not going to talk about matrix or matrices in this video, so we're just going to deal with the top 3 layers. So let's go back to layer 1. So inputs. The inputs here could be, let's say this is your kick drum. Okay, you could bring this up and you could use some of these controls for that. Maybe these are, just different vocal mics or guitars, or you can set these however you need to according to what's plugged into the console. If we go to layer 2, you'll see that these faders move. So now we can have separate settings for all of these additional channels that we have down here. And whatever we need for our mix, we go back, and now we have channels 1 through 17, and then 17 to 32. So I'm going to push these down, just bring these all back down to 0 here so that we can keep our discussions moving. And what I want to do next is talk about all the controls that we have up at the top here. The way I explain this to all of my new people is it's kind of like if you're going to write an email. You can start to type your email, and you could maybe make some words bold. And then you pause on that email, and you go to type a different email, and maybe this one you change the font, or you highlight something. So all of the controls are in the same location, but you're addressing each email individually. Well, that's the same for all of these controls up here at the top. We start out, we have a preamp or our gain knob. We've also got a 48-volt button, which is used if you have certain microphones plugged in. We have a phase button, which might be used on drums mostly, maybe some guitars, but mostly on drums. We have a low cut, which is going to kind of work in combination with our equalizer here, but the low cut knob. We have a gate here, which is a great tool to use on some things. We've got a compressor. It says dynamics, but this is a compressor or expander. And then our whole EQ section here is how we can use to address problems within our signal. We also have some bus sends. I really rarely use this whole batch of knobs here, but they are here and available. We'll explain those in a minute. And then finally we have our main bus option. We have a mono bus button and panning left and right. And more importantly here, we have our stereo bus button. Now, when I want to use these features, I would select an instrument. Okay. And then these are functional for this one selected instrument. If I make changes, I'm just going to push these buttons here and they'll light up orange. If I go to another instrument, that was channel 10. If I jump over here to channel 12, you'll see that these are not orange. And that's because that setting was for channel 9, not channel 12. So we have the ability to treat each channel or input source individually. Now again, each input could be a microphone, it could be a guitar amplifier, it could be a drum microphone, it could be a keyboard, anything that you're going to get to come, signal that you're going to come into the board, you've got these features here to use if they're on channels 1 through 32. So the next thing we want to do is look at the right side of the board. And on the right side of the board, we start out on our first layer with what we call DCAs. These are digitally controlled amplifiers. And what it lets you do is, let's say you have all of these faders here. Let's say that these are for your drums and you have a bunch of mics on your drums and they look like this. Well, if you're trying to mix and you need to turn these all down, you have to try and get all of them to come down evenly, and it's just not practical. So what a DCA lets you do is control any selected channels at the same time. So we can push and hold this, and then we can select the channels that we want to have impacted. When we let go, now this becomes one volume knob for all of these faders. So we only have to move one, and it'll control all of that volume. The ratio will stay the same. This mix would stay the same. It's literally just turning it down or up. So that's a quick, easy way. We've got 8 faders that we can use. And how do we use this practically? Well, in my service, a lot of times I have a computer hooked up to come in way over here on this input 5 and 6. And I have to be able to quickly turn that volume up or down on the computer, and I have to be able to address it before or after my band plays. So what I can do is select this one channel. I can turn these on, and then that way, when I'm mixing up here with my band, just before I need to, I have one fader that's going to work now my computer volume, and I don't have to do this stuff and then flip over here and then try and find it and then have to try and flip back and do that stuff. I just have one fader to make the workflow a lot easier. So again, earlier in the example, this was for our drum, all of these faders, but we've changed it now to be over on these. So I'm going to deselect this. We'll keep moving because the rest of the right side of the console deals with outputs. So right now our mix goes over here to our main output fader. If we had audio going through and we push this up, we would start to see some lights light up and we would see things come up here on the screen. And that's where our main mix is going out to this main fader, which goes to our main in-house speakers. The next layer down, we have 16 buses. So we have here bus 1 through 8, and then here is bus 9 through 16. And this is kind of a default setup here, the way the console is laid out right now. The best way I explain what a bus does is a bus is just like a school bus. It's going to carry a large group of people, or instruments in this case, to one single destination. So we can do some things that I'll show you in a second, and we can put people or instruments on that bus, and then wherever we tell that bus to go, that's where it'll be heard. This is useful for monitors. So I've got a recent video that talks about setting up monitors. And so we use some buses for that. Sometimes we'll use buses for a live stream environment where we'll create a mix that doesn't go out our mains to our house, but it's a different mix that will go out to a live stream or maybe a cry room or a nursery. Maybe you send some music to your foyer so people can hear when they're coming in. They can hear what's going on in the room, and they have their own little mix. But these are outputs, and they are linked to, by default, to the outputs on the back of the board. So we have 16 outputs on the back of the board. This would be linked to 1 through 8, and then 9 through 16. However, it gets a little tricky when you get to these purple ones, because these are set for effects. And what we would do is use this to build a little mix of things that we want to go into a specific effect. We'll come back to that in a minute, but these are here as outputs. And then the last thing we have down here, which we said we weren't going to talk about, but I'll push the button anyway. This is the opportunity of 6 matrix sends. And we also have a mid or center channel that we have the ability to work with as well. So as we come back to our little example here, we are not using any DCAs right now. I've turned those off. And we have a little miniature mix that we're building that's going out to our main house speakers. So this little mix is going out to our main house speakers. Well, let's say we have a monitor and we want to set up a monitor. We can select the monitor that we want to work with. And then there's this fabulous button in the middle right here. It says Sends on Fader. When I push it, we now have all of these faders to build a mix to go to this one monitor. So maybe they need some of these drum mics, and then maybe they need some of these other mics over here, and maybe they even need stuff from these other layers. I'm not going to do it right now for the example, but maybe they do. You have the ability to even go over here and add in the PC channel, your computer channel. You could add in some of these effects returns if you wanted to, and they could go into this mix for a monitor. All right. So if this is our mix and that's going to monitor 1, we could then come over to monitor 2, and you'll see now how it's zeroed out. And we could do a similar thing. We could repeat the process and build a mix for this other bus. So what we're doing is we have put all of these people or instruments on this bus, and then this one would be sent in this example to a monitor. If I deselect Sends on Fader, which likes to blink red to warn you that you're on Sends on Fader, when you go back here, keep in mind this is what's being sent to our room right now, our main mix. But the monitor is hearing something completely different. So you really have a lot of flexibility that you can custom build some specific mixes that go to specific places using these mix buses. Now, I've also talked about setting up, this is a mono mix because it just has one fader that's working for this right now. We do have the ability, if I hit Sends on Fader, up in this screen up here, we could go to the Config tab and we could hit the Link button, and it's going to link 1 and 2. Now they move together. And what that gives us the ability to do is have a stereo send. So this is a great example of what we might do on a live stream, where now we have the ability to pan hard left and hard right coming into the stream to really give us a lot of width in this mix that we're doing. But I'm going to go back to unlinking that. This is now disconnected, and we just have this mix here going to that one monitor. All right, we'll turn Sends on Fader off. At this point, all you need to do if you're learning how to run a mix in the house is select a channel. We can come in and use these controls right here to set our gain, set maybe our EQing and our compression, and that should be a great start right there. Now here's one thing to note. Each of these controls has a little view button on it. This becomes a great thing because we can quickly hit the view button and the screen changes to view our EQ, or if I hit on the compressor and I hit view, now we have our compressor window up. And if I go to gate, it's going to look very similar, but it's now the gate. But you can also see that we have some, it's really just flipping between tabs up here in the screen. So we're on the gate tab right now. The compressor or dynamics is the next one. We can use these arrow buttons to go over there. EQ is the next one, so I can page over or mouse to the right to the next tab. So we can see those things there. Also, if I look at sends, which is the next tab over, you'll see that 1 and 2, because we had built the little mini mix, 1 and 2 have some send in there. So if I select 1 and I hit sends on fader, we can see that this was channel 6. Channel 6 has been put into this mix from mix bus 1. If I deselect it, all right, now we're back on channel 6, and we can see up here that it's in there. Also, these little bus send encoders, which I said I rarely ever use, also show us that we can turn it up or down. They're just volume knobs that you have the ability to turn up for bus 1, and you'll see that it correlates here on the screen if I turn it down. Okay, and you've got little layers over here as well, because remember we have 16 outputs or sends on the right, and so we have 1 through 4, 5 through 8, all the way up to 16, and they're displayed here, and you can just do them in groups of 4. But that's the basics of the console here. The next thing I want to show you is how to save your scene. Over on the right side of the screen here, we have a scene area and a view button. And when we hit the view button, we come up here to this window. Now yours probably defaults to the tab that says Cues, and you can change it in your setup window to have it select the scenes instead. But here, I can come down, and this is my this was my blank scene, and so I could select one of these and hit. I could just twist to go to different ones here, the various ones in here. So I could hit the save encoder. Then I can name it whatever I want to name it. Then I would hit save on the right. Now I'm not going to do it because I don't want these changes to be saved. But then I could hit the save button, and then it would ask me if I really want to save, and I would hit the right arrow key to actually save that change. Let's go to a different scene just to show you an example here. I'm just going to hit the back button and then back over to scenes. So what I'm going to do is go down one of my more recent ones. I had a training scene in here, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to push go. It says, do you really want to go? And I'll hit yes. And so now everything has changed to what I had stored in that scene. And then I could go back to my blank one. By coming up here, I can hit go. And now I'm back to my blank scene. So scenes become great because if you have different services that use all of your same gear, you can have all of the settings saved for each individual performance. You could also save things for a worship night versus a Sunday morning versus a Wednesday night service. All kinds of flexibility there. All right, let me show you one last feature that I get a lot of questions about. Let's say you have a click track. All right, a lot of people are using click tracks right now. They just want them to go to in-ear monitors. How would I set that up to be in a monitor, but not be heard in my main room? So let's say that the click track is coming in on input 16. So I'm going to select input 16. The click track I'm going to bring up to 0, okay, on my unity is what we call it in the middle here. There's a 0 mark. And so we bring it up to 0 or unity. And then the magic button is the stereo bus right here. We're going to deselect that. So now the audio would come in, the click track would come in, it would be turned up, but it will not go to our stereo bus. So we won't hear that all the way over here in our room mix. Now we have the ability, the option of coming into any of these buses or monitors in this case. We can hit sends on fader, and then if this monitor needs click track, we can just bring that up. Okay, we can turn it up, turn it down. Now you would want to label, if I go back out here, if you want to label channel 16 to be click track, how would you do that? We would go over here to the setup button. We can mouse over to the different tabs, and there's one that says name and icon. And this is where we can change colors. Maybe we find a red because we don't want them to touch it, because you wouldn't want to move this fader while you're mixing. So we'll make it red, and then we can hit the edit button here, and then we have the ability to use this little feature to type letters. So C, and I'll just type in click here. All right. So it says click, and then at the end, close is under the first encoder. So I do that. And now it says click, and it's bright red. So that might help you then when you're going through and building a mix for this mix bus number 3. You can see that that's the red one. We know we want to bring that up, put click into their monitor, and then we move on. So that's important. That stereo bus button is important. If you wanted to put something in the mid channel, if you happen to be running a left, right, and center channel, and you only want things specific levels in the center channel, that's what this top area here is for. You would select mono bus on a channel that's selected. So we can use our click track as an example. We've deselected stereo, but let's say we want to put the click right in the middle of our center channel. We would select this button, and then we've got a volume knob that we can use to turn up or down in that center channel. Once you set a certain amount, it does follow your fader. It would also typically follow your master or your main left and right fader as well. It would turn that up and down within the percentage that you have it turned up with this encoder. All right, so at this point we've talked about the left side is inputs, the right side is outputs. With effects, let's talk about effects real quick. In this board you've got, if we go to effects home, in this board you have 8 different effects racks that you can use. On the left side you've got your insert effects. They could also be effects returns, but the right side is insert only. So the effects returns, if we look at this first one, it is set up as a reverb by default. And that correlates, you see it says bus 13 there, that correlates to our buses down here. Remember we had 1 through 8, and now we get to bus 13 and it's purple. Well, they labeled these all because 13, 14, 15, 16 correlate to these effects. So we have a reverb. We can build, we have to now send an instrument or a microphone into that reverb. So what we're going to do is, just like a monitor, we're going to hit select. You'll see how it makes that window bigger for us, which is great. We hit sends on fader, and now we have all of these inputs to be able to send into this effect. Now this is nice because if we wanted some reverb on our click, we could push the click up and it would go into that reverb. We probably don't want that. Maybe we want some vocal mics to go into that reverb. Let's say we have 4 vocal mics. We can send those into the reverb. and then it's going to go internally out of the board and into this effect, and then it comes back. Well, where does it come back? I'm going to hit Sends on Fader. Well, those vocal mics that go through the reverb from bus 13 are going to return over here on the far left on this third layer, and this is bus 13's return. So it goes out mono, and the reverb is a stereo reverb. It returns with a stereo channel, left and right here. So this says effects 1, then you've got 2, 3, and 4. So if you've ever worked with old analog gear, you had to plug a cable in, and then you would have 2 cables left and right that would come return into the board. These are the returns right here. And so you're sending this mix out to a reverb just like a monitor, but the reverb is sending it back into the console here. And now you can add these in. If we go back up to this other monitor mix that we were building, mix bus 3, we hit Sends on Fader. If that monitor wants this reverb in their monitor, you have the ability to add this because it's considered an input into that mix bus. So we have click track going in, nothing on the second layer, and then we have some reverb. So they're getting some form of reverb and a click track. It doesn't sound like the greatest sounding monitor, but that's what we've done in this example. All right, so what a powerful console we've got. This thing is amazing. We covered a bunch of ground in this video, but you can go back and check it out, rewatch it if you need to review anything. Hopefully you found something helpful in this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button too, because I'm putting out new videos every week. So thanks for watching this one. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.